Recent topic that I think a lot of people are interested in and that I wanted to cover. And it's a topic on ivermectin, which is a drug used both in human and veterinary medicine. I titled it the drug that everybody loves to hate. Um, it was during COVID, it got a bad name because it was a veterinary drug used for human people. Well, what most people don't realize is most drugs start out as veterinary drugs because they do all the animal testing, and then they end up as human drugs after they've been veterinary drugs. So, anyways, we're going to focus on ivermectin today. Ivermectin has a really, really interesting history. And I think just as history is important in social, political, cultural venues, history is also really important in medicine. Ivermectin was discovered in the late 1970s, and it's an interesting story of discovery because it happened to be a soil sample, a soil bacterium found in Japan called Streptomyces a vermiculus, and it's this single bacterium that produces ivermectin. And there's a story on PubMed, there's an article on PubMed outlining the history of it, and the quote from that is that they pulled ivermectin out of a highly potent bioactive fermentation broth made up of an organism isolated in the soil in Japan. So it actually is what we're calling these days a postbiotic. It is made by a bacterium. And it's a class of drugs that soon became labeled avermectin. So we have ivermectin, we have selamectin, we have other advanced stages of the ivermectin. But ivermectin was a big one, and they started using it actually in human medicine all the way back in 1978. And it pretty much revolutionized medicine for tropical, subtropical areas in third world countries because they found it cured a parasitic disease that humans get called onchocerciasis and elephantiasis. And I don't know about you, but there's pictures out there on the internet of people with elephantiasis, and we learned about this in biology, and they get these huge growths, like some of the men's testicles are like basketball sized and these huge growths coming off their bodies. And ivermectin went in and literally cleared that parasite like within 24 to 48 hours. So it's been a miracle drug for treating parasitic diseases in the tropics for people. Now, in veterinary medicine, we started using it for heartworm preventative, and it is the active medication that is in HeartGuard Plus all the way back in the 70s because it kills blood-borne parasites like the microfilaria of heartworm disease. We also use it to kill scabies, which again is another parasitic mite that causes this clumping. I always see it on stray cats on the edges of their ears. Um, it got there was a big campaign that was started in the holistic community online about heartworm preventatives poisoning animals, and I have really had a problem with that because HeartGuard having ivermectin in it is probably one of the safest drugs for humans and animals that we've ever had. In terms of animal use, Tess Lori, she did a lot of meta studies around COVID, and she went back and looked at the history of ivermectin all the way from the 1970s on up, with millions of doses prescribed to people all around the world. And there were literally like 40 cases of adverse events ever reported. Now, in dogs, one of the things about ivermectin is it can cause neurological problems if it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And in dogs, we have certain breeds of dogs that have a genetic mutation called the MDR1 mutation that causes them to have a leaky blood-brain barrier. So if they get ivermectin in too high of dosages, the drug will get into their brain and cause neurological symptoms and potentially death if it's at high enough dosages. Okay. So number one, if it's in the dosages used in heartworm preventative, we're talking micrograms, so like 6 micrograms per kilogram. Um, so it's very, very, very minute dosages used. Okay, now some people take like the horse and cow injectable ivermectin because it's cheaper, and they said, well, we'll dilute it out. It's very difficult to dilute out to get the minutest doses that you need for heartworm preventative. And I think that's where some people run into problems. They also run into problems not realizing this MDR1 gene. It's mostly in herding breeds, Australian Shepherds, Collies, Shelties, but I think they're starting to find it in some other breeds, but there is a test out there so you can get your dog tested for it. So that's kind of the history of ivermectin. Now, COVID came along, and what was really interesting is they found out that ivermectin has antiviral activity. It has actually 50 different mechanisms. I got stuck. Get back. Hopefully I'm back. Hopefully I'm back. Wow. Yeah, for whatever reason, and I'm sitting here like right next to my router too, so I hope you guys can hear me now. Um, so there's 50 different mechanisms that ivermectin has to prevent cells in prevent viruses from getting inside cells and to prevent those viruses from hijacking the cellular machinery that's inside the cell to reproduce themselves. Now, there was a man in 2015 that actually won the Nobel Prize in physiology and medicine for the use of ivermectin. So when the virus thing came up, there were doctors looking for any kind of antivirals they could use to repurpose from other medications. So, they actually, and this is a study I talked about it in my first video that didn't get recorded, and I'm gonna talk about it here because it happened right in my backyard. There was a doctor at Broward Medical Hospital who had 2 patients that had COVID he was worried and concerned because they were doing so poorly. He was afraid he was gonna have to put them on a ventilator the next morning when he went into the hospital. Now, his wife was also an MD, and she happened to be reading a medical journal that night, and she found a study that came out about ivermectin's effect in vitro in the petri dish of preventing viruses from getting into cells, into human cell lines. So she told her husband about it. He went into the hospital the next day. He found in their pharmacy in the hospital, they had doses of ivermectin available. He went to the 2 people. One of them, a woman, her son was begging the doctor to try whatever experimental thing he could, and he was willing to sign off on a release, so he did. He gave these 2 patients ivermectin, and they literally walked out of the hospital 24 hours later. Never had to go on a ventilator. And so that word got around to other physicians around the country, and people started using it not only to treat the virus, but to use as a prophylactic to keep from getting infected by the virus. And many, many, many people have used it. Although our media and the politicization of medicine was putting out all of this disinformation and misinformation about using it and trying to persuade people not to use it, to the point there's evidence they were buying up stores of ivermectin so that it wasn't even on the market to be sold. I will tell you a private story. I called up one of my drug distributors and asked them if they had any tablets of ivermectin, the human form, because I had a big mastiff that required a higher dose. And they told me, gone, just me. I'm sorry if this is going in and out. I'm going to record it, and hopefully the whole thing will be on the recording. Okay. Um, so I asked them if I could order it, and this was right as the virus was starting in 2020, and they refused. They had a block on me being able to actually order the human tablets. So just some interesting things going on there. So now we know it's good for antiviral, both DNA and RNA viruses. The fact it has so many mechanisms to prevent viruses means that there's very little chance of drug resistance developing. Um, Now, what we're also finding is that ivermectin has mechanisms, many different mechanisms to help in terms of cancer. So it has mechanisms for to cause cell death of abnormal cancer cells, apoptosis. It has mechanisms to inhibit the proliferation and metastasis of cancer cells. And there's mechanisms where it will actually resensitize cancer cell lines to chemotherapy once they become drug resistant. So Dr. Judy Morgan did a great video on all of these studies. They're all coming off of PubMed. There's lots and lots of studies showing that it may be useful for cancer therapy. So here's the problem. So why aren't we using it for cancer therapy? Why were they against it being an antiviral? Because ivermectin is off patent. It is one of the cheapest medicines out there available, like pennies on the dollar. You can go to Mexico and buy boxes of it, an parasite treatment of 4 tablets for $15. So drug companies are not going to be making millions of dollars off this. So they're not going to be put any money into research and development. People are using it combined with something called fenbendazole, which is interesting because fenbendazole is another anti-parasite agent to treat cancer. And there are a lot of anecdotal reports of people who it's really, really helping. Now, these are anecdotes. There's no studies being done. We don't know, we don't necessarily have the types of cancer, what else they were doing in terms of treating cancer. There's just a lot of different information we're missing. There are some of us veterinarians using it in veterinary cases to treat cancer in animals. But I want to preface that with cancer, number one, I could spend a few days on talking about. Um, you have to, if you want to do this, you need to be working with a veterinarian who's like on your side, who's willing to help with developing the right dosages. Because again, with both of these medications, they are pharmaceuticals and you don't want to overdose because the animals can get sick. They are both also metabolized by the liver. One of the things we have been seeing is liver problems when they're at high doses for too long of a time. Also, these are cancer patients. So when you have cancer, your immune system is dysregulated to begin with. You're usually very chi or energy deficient because a cancer is like a black hole sucking up energy out of the body. There's a lot of other things going on. The liver happens to be one of the favored places for cancer to metastasize to. So were some of these liver failures because there was cancer in the liver or the liver's ability to metabolize drugs was inhibited because of the cancer? We don't know. We don't know, and we don't have answers to any of these questions. That being said, um, first off, my take on cancer is the way to cure cancer, the surefire way to cure cancer is to never to get it in the first place and to do everything you can to prevent it, both in yourself and in your animals. Okay, cancer is a multi-layered disease. It's a disease of our own cells. Now, there's different theories of cancer as a disease. There's the genetic theory, which is the primary theory used by the cancer industry, that it's a genetic mutation, and all we need to do is go in there and kill or cut out the abnormal cells. But what makes the abnormal cells, what makes those cells mutate and become start growing abnormally in the first place. There's another theory of cancer called the metabolic theory, which says that it has to do with our mitochondria getting sick and not functioning appropriately. Now, there's a lot of toxins that we are walking around surrounded by on a daily basis that injure our mitochondria. So one of those happens to be glyphosate, which has literally become ubiquitous in the environment. It is probably in everything you eat or drink right now. So doing regular glyphosate detoxes, one of those is like Ion Biome from Zach Bush, some things like that to flush the glyphosate out of your system, keeping your mitochondria really healthy. One way to do that is using red light therapy. So one reason it's become so popular is because the mitochondria suck up red lights and it keeps the cells healthy. The other thing is just to eat as healthy as possible. I know it's expensive, but getting cancer is even more expensive and deadly. So you kind of have to make choices on what you can spend. I know everybody has limited funds, but what you can spend your limited funds on. Get to know your local farmers. That's one major suggestion. Um, in terms of using this with animals, I have had 3 patients on it. The one patient I lost touch with, it was during COVID. They lived a good distance away from me. They were still in South Florida, but I lost touch with them. Their little schnauzer had a really big tumor on its thyroid gland, and I was worried that it was going to start causing breathing problems. They really wanted to try whatever they could, so I figured out an ivermectin fenbendazole dose with them. The dog was also on Chinese herbs. The dog was also on a ketogenic diet, along with some other supplements, particularly mushroom supplements. Okay, so when I see cancer, I think the best thing is to hit it with all you have. And you have to be careful because a dog can detox too fast. It can make them sick. Sometimes you have to back off on what you're giving them. It's a whole dance. So anyways, they were using it, and it turned out I lost touch with them for a couple months. The dog ended up dying, but they said the tumor actually stopped growing, and the dog never had any breathing problems. And the dog ended up dying because it fell off of a high bed, their kid's bunk bed, and ended up breaking her pelvis. So that was kind of a sad story. Now, another story I had that I put the dog on was a dog who later, when I was taking a really thorough history, I found out was on 5 years worth of daily Apoquel for allergies. Apoquel is a drug that's used for itching, and I have sat in a lecture hall and watched 2 board-certified dermatologists on a stage warn 500 veterinarians sitting in this lecture hall that if their patients are on Apoquel and they come down with cancer, to take them off the Apoquel. So I actually got up during that lecture and raised my hand and really didn't wait until they answered on me and just spoke out loud and said, "Isn't it a little too late once they have cancer to take them off the drug that potentiated and potentially caused their cancer?" So if your dog's on Apoquel, the first thing to do is just get the dog off of Apoquel. I'd rather have an itchy dog any day of the week than a dog with cancer. There are just once cancer happens or once an autoimmune condition happens, it is very difficult to get that reversed and to get that flipped back over. It's like the breaker box in the body just completely blows. Now, it is possible. I know I have 5 people that I have literally sat and had a conversation with and knew very well who cleared cancer from their body for good. And all 3 of the 3 people that really come to mind are people who completely changed their lifestyle. It was like they walked out a door out of their current life. One of them left family, friends, everybody behind and went and lived the life they dreamed of living and ate really good food, and the cancer disappeared. Another one went up to a Tibetan monastery in upstate New York before she was going to go in that following Monday to start chemotherapy. And she got hooked in by the llama's compassion, and something in her mindset and her soul and her heart shifted. She went back into Sloan Kettering that Monday morning to get a PET scan done, and they did the PET scan, and the doctor came in her room and said, "We need to repeat it." And she said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, I think we got it mixed up with somebody else's." They did a second PET scan and came back to her and said, "We can't find the tumors that were there last week in your body." Okay, so I wouldn't have believed this if I didn't know the person and I didn't know the people involved, and haven't been to the I've been to the monastery myself, but it's those types of things where there is an absolute shift in the spiritual, mental, emotional makeup of the patient to flip that metabolism around and the body start healing itself and removing the abnormal cells, because our immune systems are built to remove abnormal cells. So that's what we want to keep really healthy. And it's not just physical health, it's mental health, it's emotional health, and it's having a really good spiritual practice and rootedness and connecting to some type of source. I'm not a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person. And there is that source, whether you want to connect to Mother Earth, whether you want to connect to the Great Spirit, to whatever it is, to the Tao, there's something there about that. So, I wanted to share some of you guys were on here yesterday, so I'm going to be really, really careful when I get off today and not hit the wrong buttons. And hopefully this will be recorded. And if you want to try ivermectin and fenbendazole, please work with a veterinarian who knows about the dosages. There's a lot of us that are now doing online consults, even though there's not one in your area. I prefer to have somebody who has a vet who's even willing to consult with me, so everybody's on the same page with their animal and you get the right dosages. And again, ivermectin it's a safe drug if used appropriately and if the animal or the human does not have a leaky blood-brain barrier. Next week, I'm going to be up at the American Holistic Veterinary Medical Association meeting, so I will not be here for the live, but I'm sure I will come back and tell you guys with some fun information that I learned while I'm up there. And have a wonderful Labor Day, and I hope to see you all soon. It's good to see clients. And if you want to reach me for a consult, the best way is either Facebook Messenger. You can email me at consult, CONSULT, with WITH at Dr. Josie, with consult with Dr. Josie, DRJOSIE, at gmail.com. So I need to speak with you a little bit, find out what you have going on, if we're a good match, and then we could set up a consult. Hi, Aggie from the Buffalo Herbalist. Thank you for joining. I love your herbal monographs and the stuff you put out there. I am an herbalist at heart, and Avma, the first day of Avma, David Winston's going to be talking for like 8 hours. So I'm ready to go up there and just absorb the information coming out of that man. So thank you for joining. Thank you all. Italy. Wow. Thank you. I may be visiting over there maybe next year. We'll see. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.